Okay, so that shows you, very speeded up, some of the bigness of our world, our planet, in the solar system, in the galaxy, in the universe and beyond. And it shows you zooming in onto a droplet of water. It's showing you some of the tiny, tiny microscopic elements that there are to our planet as well, or to our world as well. Going back to my dad again, not that long before he died, he wrote this book called Saving Planet Earth, a Christian perspective and response to the world. And in it, he wrote a couple of excerpts which I think are quite helpful. What Francis Collins was talking about and what Dad's talking about in this book is something called intelligent design. It's not a scientific construct, but it can be an aid in looking to see if there's the evidence of God. Here in Dad's book, he talks about natural theology, which helps us thinking about the beauty and grandeur of the God of creation. So let me just read you a couple of excerpts. In a chemistry lecture I gave years ago on oxygen and its compounds, I was astounded to have an interruption from the floor. Students just didn't do that kind of thing in those days. I'd been talking simply as a chemist about this remarkable substance when a student stood up and said, "Sir," that's what they used to call you in those days, "you almost make me believe in God." I have to say I was quite nonplussed. I hadn't been trying to argue for the existence of God, though I gladly admitted that I did believe in him. It was simply that the facts told their own story. And another excerpt, he talks about a well-known Christian leader called Michael Green, who once gave an illustration something like this. Imagine you are playing a giant game of Scrabble with many thousand pieces. You leave the room and return to find someone has upset the game, and instead of loose pieces on the floor, you discovered an Oxford English dictionary. Did the random letters just happen to land in all the right places, or was there a designing mind behind the book? Back in 1800, William Paley used the same kind of argument about the universe. He compared it to a watch picked up from a heath. After a lengthy examination, he concludes the watch has not always been there. It had not been a random collection of objects, but was the result of immensely careful design. Can you believe that planet Earth is anything else? There's lots more that I could say on that subject, lots more that I could give you to read if you want to read it, but I'm going to stop there. We can all, I think, identify with some of the things that those little excerpts mention. But what about us? How do you react when you come to look at the creation that's around you? I can remember once years ago, I was in the Lake District National Park with a friend and we were watching a sunset and it was beautiful. It was beautiful weather, beautiful scenery, beautiful sunset. It just had everything going for it. Her reaction was, "Oh, it makes you feel so emotional." And I wondered at the time what was behind those words. I can also remember incidents as a child and a teenager happening several times. I can remember sitting on a kind of rocky knoll over a beach on a beautiful, warm, sunny day. And I was with my family and we were going somewhere, but we'd stopped for a while, maybe for a picnic, I can't remember. And I was looking out to sea. There was a light breeze, it was warm, the seagulls were making a noise, you could hear the water lapping on the shore, there was a light breeze, you could see the light on the water, and I just wanted to sit there and kind of muse, which I did for about 30 seconds, until my dad, who was always keen to move on, suggested that we moved, or maybe one of my siblings was creating a fuss, and the instruction I got was, "Come along now." And I had to go. Now that's happened more than once to me when I've just wanted to stay and look and just drink it in and not do anything else. And I've felt the same in the Peak District National Park during the lockdown days, just going out cycling when we've got to a point, and particularly when it was full lockdown, when there was no traffic on the roads, the weather was fantastic, getting to the top of a hill and just wanting to stop and just look and just savour the beauty of creation, the sound of the skylarks, the warmth of the sun, the view, and not go anywhere else. Just stop for a minute. And it's interesting, isn't it, how in these days of the pandemic, there's been an enhanced awareness of nature, but of also emotional well-being and a connection between the two. The emphasis that if you can, go out for a walk, get out, not just to get fresh air, but get out into nature. Go out in your garden, do some digging, do some gardening, plant some seeds. If you can't do that, sit by a window, open it, listen to the birds, look at the trees, feel the breeze. And as soon as the rules were relaxed, 2 or 3 weeks ago, Joe Public headed to the coasts, the parks, the national parks in droves. Some of them even came to a toxic lake in Buxton. But why? Not why the toxic lake, but why go into any of these places? Being cooped up indoors in towns and cities restricts our mental health. Getting out helps us to feel better. I took a quote off, I can't remember which website now, I'd have to check, but one of the websites on Healthy Minds. And it said this: being in nature or even viewing scenes of nature reduces anger, fear and stress and increases pleasant feelings. Exposure to nature not only makes you feel better emotionally, it contributes to your physical well-being, reducing blood pressure, heart rate, muscle tension and the production of stress hormones. But why? That's what I want to know. Is it because it connects us in some way to the Creator? Is it because it touches the soul in ways that other things can't? Does it create an intangible response in us? Is it actually a way of connecting with God? God who created us, God who created the things that we are enjoying. Biblical writers experienced this too. Let me read you Psalm 19. The heavens are telling the glory of God. They are a marvellous display of his craftsmanship. Day and night they keep on telling about God. Without a sound or word, silent in the skies, their message reaches out to all the world. The sun lives in the heavens where God placed it and moves out across the skies as radiant as a bridegroom going to his wedding or as joyous as an athlete looking forward to a race. The sun crosses the heavens from end to end and nothing can hide from its heat. So that's one psalmist. That's the psalmist talking about the heavens, the skies, the stars, the sun. But then in Psalm 8 we read, O Lord our God, the majesty and glory of your name fills all the earth and overflows the heavens. You've taught the little children to praise you perfectly. May their example shame and silence your enemies. When I look up into the night skies and see the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars you've made, I cannot understand how you can bother with mere puny man to pay any attention to him. And yet, you have made him only a little lower than the angels and placed a crown of glory and honour upon his head. And so there the psalmist is also talking about creation, but also reflecting on our role within creation, our role as people and how we fit into that picture, not just the magnitude of creation, but actually God made us. God wants us as his friends as well. I said earlier we're going to relate this to the song How Great Thou Art. And it's not really a surprise, I think, that song fits in very well here. The first verse reads, O Lord my God, when I in awesome wonder consider all the world works thy hand hath made. I see the stars, I hear the mighty rolling thunder, thy power throughout the universe displayed. And so it goes on, talking about mountains, talking about birds, etc. But what's the response in the song? It's the same response, I think, that I felt when I was sitting up by the beach, when we were cycling in the Peak District, that you would feel when you look at the stars, the mountains, hear a stream. The response is, then sings my soul, my Saviour God, to thee, how great thou art, how great thou art. That's our response. It makes us connect with God. It makes us sing to God. It makes us rejoice in the fact that there is a good creator who's made all this stuff all this beautiful, positive stuff, not the negative, bad stuff. But interestingly, in that song, as it goes on, in the next to the final verse, there's I have a slight hesitation with the words in that verse. The song itself was actually written in Swedish about 80 years ago and was translated into English. And in translating, that penultimate, that final verse actually got slightly mistranslated. And actually, it was better, as it was originally written in Swedish, if you can understand Swedish, than it is in the English. It reads, "When Christ shall come with shouts of acclamation and take me home, what joy shall fill my heart." Well, what's wrong with that, you might think? It's a little bit involved, and there is some excellent material around if you want to read more about it, but I'm going to try and make it really, really simple. We talk about the sun rising and setting, even though we know it's the earth that actually moves relative to the sun. Okay, none of us think that the sun's moving across the sky and the world is standing still. We know that the earth rotates around the earth, and it rotates on its axis for every 24 hours, and that's why we have day and night. The sun seems to rise and set. In the same way as that, early Christians spoke of Jesus coming and returning, but not quite meaning that. The bigger picture in the New Testament suggests if we're to understand these concepts properly, it may not be the most helpful way by using that kind of terminology. For example, we talk about children moving up to secondary school. We talk about university students going down from university. On neither occasion do we mean they're floating upwards or dropping down. What we mean is they're transitioning from a primary school to a secondary school, or they're transitioning from being at university to finishing and going home again. We don't literally mean rising up, sinking down. In the same way that when the early Christians talk about Jesus coming and going, they didn't necessarily mean it quite like that. The New Testament sense is much more that of Jesus is transforming this world, is going to be transforming this world, and that we're going to be staying here. That's the view of the church in the early days of Christianity, rather than of us going anywhere else with him. That sense it represents some recent, predominantly American misunderstandings that have come in New Testament theology. In places such as 1 Corinthians 15, verses 23 to 27, if you want to read them, 51 to 54, and Philippians 3, verses 20 to 21, those speak of the dead being raised, those who are alive now being transformed, and Christ reigning supreme in this transformed world, with no mention of anybody going anywhere other than staying here, and home is this home which will have been transformed. There are just 2 verses in 1 Thessalonians taken in isolation which have misconstrued and been taken out of the overall New Testament context. We need to have an overview of what the whole of the New Testament is teaching, rather than just focus on a couple of verses which seem a bit inconsistent with the rest. It might be helpful to suggest that signposts in the mist don't generally give a photograph of your destination on them, but they are still true and pointing in the right direction. So we can't necessarily see everything, but we look at where the signposts are pointing. I don't want to spoil a really good song or lose what was said earlier in this talk. I just want to challenge us to consider words that we sing and make sure we believe them. Returning to the original Swedish version of this song allows us to use it to proclaim God through his creation. What it originally said was, find the words of the song, it said, "When Christ shall come with shouts of acclamation and heal this world, what joy shall fill my heart." Much more could actually be said on that subject. There's a fabulous book called Surprised by Hope, written by Tom Wright, who unpacks this over several chapters in far more depth and with far more understanding and experience than I've got, who could actually explain that. I read it in 2007 when it was first published, and it transformed my understanding and my thinking. So I do recommend it. So going back to where we started, is there a creator God? Does the natural world stimulate a deep personal response with us to a power greater than ourselves? Francis Collins, looking at the human genome and the DNA sequence, was convinced. But not only that, he said the other thing that totally convinced him was maths. I didn't even begin to understand that. You might. But actually the way maths works makes him think there is something bigger outside of that. It's not just looking at creation. Sometimes music, does that not strike a chord within you? Sometimes it can make you weep because it really touches something in our souls. So is there a creator God? Does this God, if he does exist, have compassion and love for humankind, both now and into the future? You may be on a journey exploring what this might mean for you. You may be further on that journey and be able to give an unequivocal yes. Wherever you are on that journey, we're all in different places and we all move from one place to another. It is a journey to continue on, to explore how this creator God potentially wants to have a relationship with you, not as a slave, but as a friend. Let's close by singing that song, How Great Thou Art. And let's see if we can remember. I've asked John if he can change the words. Hopefully he'll have been able to do so. But if not, when we get to that verse, can we remember to sing, when Christ shall come with shouts of acclamation and heal this world, make this world even more perfect than it is at the moment. It's not perfect at the moment, we know that, but even more beautiful than it is at the moment. So let's sing the song as a response to the amazing God who created us, loves us, and is part of our lives now and into the future.